So a little bit of our story is when we started working in Honduras, it was with orphanages because that was just where God led us. That was our heart. And we were working with about 40-something orphanages doing different programs. And we just began to realize that it was basically a cycle of emergency mode. So the kids would come in, we'd fill emergency needs. More kids would come in, fill emergency needs. And then we watched, because we did that for about 8 years, we watched kids age out, and then their babies come in the system, their children, or just knew them personally and watched them struggle and struggle and struggle, as you guys know from what Transition Honduras does with the youth that are aging out. And so it just became this realization and a God journey for my husband and I, of realizing, okay, maybe orphanages isn't the best answer. Maybe we're missing something. And all of our friends, we never ran an orphanage. We just helped them. And so, all the directors and staff had become our friends, and we're just watching them run themselves ragged in trying to take care of 50-something kids. And as you know, little ones get lots of attention because they're right there and they need attention. And as they get older, they're kind of just maintained, and you know what happens with that cycle. And so that journey just brought us to what we do, which is foster care. And so foster care is new for Honduras. It was not a big concept before 2015, which is when the new welfare office was established. That's called DNAF. So I'll say DNAF a lot, so that you know that's the welfare system for family and children services. And before that, it was just not an entity that really did what they were supposed to do for kids. They just kept putting them in orphanages, and it was just basically, and as that booklet, if you want to know more, basically the whole country just began to lean on orphanages as the only answer for vulnerable kids. And so through our work in that 8 years, we began to realize that things needed to change. And we had no experience prior with foster care in the States or anything like that. So we really didn't know what we were getting into. We weren't trained to do it. We didn't get educated to do it, but God used us anyway. And so today Identity Mission is the largest leading private organization for foster care. We hope that's not always the situation because we're small. So we hope larger organizations, and there is a couple that are starting to get started. We hope larger organizations will take the banner on for foster care and grow it much more rapid than we've been able to. But we've been very honored to have been a part of God establishing foster care in Honduras. We only work in 2 regions, which is the Cortez, which is San Pedro Sula, and Comayagua region. And so we would love to keep growing that, but or other organizations start, which would be even better. And so one thing we also realized was, even after we started foster care, and you kind of saw that in our video, even foster care is not getting to the root cause of the problems of orphanhood and why children enter the system. So even some of our foster children that have been reintegrated still go back to families that are struggling and then come back into the system. And everybody kind of knows that happens with foster care in the States. Or what I don't know about foster care in Europe. You guys can tell me later. But different how that goes. So we began to also realize it wasn't getting to the root cause, and so that's why we launched the family, or we'll always say the Lord launched it because we weren't ready and we didn't know what we were doing, but he always, here's the next step, here's the next step. And so we worked with a family for about 2 years before we took on a second family. And Carlos is our director of that, so he's going to share with you a lot about the family preservation. But anyway, that all to say, we began to see there were other root causes, and that's family breakdown. And what's breaking down family? Well, poverty usually. And so through our learning and research of how to do better orphan care, through foster care and things like that, we were also taught this, that just because a family is poor, it's not a just reason for them to lose their children. But 80% of the kids in orphanages in Honduras have a family member that could take care of them with support. And so, without getting too much into the orphan care, because I know you guys are more leaning towards empowering the moms of these kids, the amount of money it takes to run an orphanage and even run a foster care, which is only a third of the cost of running an orphanage. It's even less than that to support that mom to take care of her kid, or that mom and dad. And so it's just crazy that we've poured so much money into solutions that aren't even reaching the root cause, and that it would be cheaper to reach the root cause than it is to build those buildings and put kids in orphanages. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's usually like my entire 30-minute presentation to churches. I gave you very short. And so that was a big, huge part of our journey that got us to where we are. And we, while foster care is still like our biggest program, family preservation is growing. We gotta, well, I'm not gonna take your stuff. So, and we are really just starting to see that, I guess what I'm trying to get across to you guys is that none of us are going to be able to reach with our one program all the needs that are out there. And so when we meet a family that needs care, or we take in a child into our foster care program, we need to lean on other organizations, the church body, even the government. And so that's what this is going to tie in. From our experience of working with orphanages, we never could reach all of the root causes. Even our experience with family preservation, we can't give those families, every family is so different. For us to meet all the needs that they have to support them to take care of their family, we can't provide all those services. And so that's kind of what this community mapping's going to be about. So I wanted to give you that background so that you understood why we launched into community mapping, which is what I'm going to share with you today. And it's because we realized, as we took in these children, as we did foster care, as we started family preservation, either you say, I'm just going to do my model and that's it, and you have to say no to all of these families and all of these kids and helping them, or you learn to do community mapping and work together, which is what we're going to talk about. That was a little bit about our orphan crisis. I kind of went through that a little bit already. I did want to make you aware of this just because in our work, no matter where we are, there are orphanages usually, small group homes, and this just breaks down really clearly, especially if you are a picture person, of why. Why does a kid need to, a vulnerable child, if they have to leave their biological family, why do they need to be taken care of in a family atmosphere and not an orphanage, and not even a small group home? Sometimes there's many times that they're necessary, but as soon as we can get them from that and healthy enough to enter a family atmosphere, this is why it needs to happen. And so it's, again, without getting into too much, your children between 0 to 3 develop their brain the most, and if they don't have the interaction of a one-on-one parent, the same one-on-one parent, to develop that attachment and those things, their actual connections, neuron connections and all of that, I don't have all the fancy words, but there's tons of good videos out there if you want to look them up, they actually don't make the connection and they break. And so that's why they struggle in school. That's why they struggle in relationships, holding down a job, things like that. It's because when they were 0 to 3, they weren't in a family. Does that make sense? And so I just wanted that picture to be in your head, because when you work with moms, women, teenage girls that are struggling, sometimes it's due to the trauma they experienced when they were 3 years and under. And so there's lots of research behind that. You can get trained as a trauma caregiver so you can understand it more, and then you understand behavior more. And so usually if you have hard behavior, it can have a lot to do with this. So, and that's a whole nother 3-day training that we won't get into. But just so I wanted it to be on your radar. And there's plenty of places to get that training and that understanding, because you can use it in any ministry, any work that you do. This is another reason in Honduras, while we're pushing towards family-based care, and we've seen this to be true working in those 40-something orphanages, and it's really, really sad. And then all that. And you may have experience with orphanages, and I don't, or like are a part of an orphanage, and I definitely don't want to hurt any feelings. It's not to do that at all. It's just awareness. As I said, we worked with orphanages for 8 years, and the people that ran them, their hearts were on target, just like ours, but our models were wrong of how we were reaching those needs. And so another encouragement before I jump into community mapping is we always have space to grow and learn. So just like you're here doing this training, all of that, our models and our programs are never perfect. And so as we can learn from each other, as we can get more training and research, let's keep growing those things. I think that was something I wish somebody would have told me during those 8 years, that I didn't go to a single training or learn other than through actual field work. I needed so much more
just wanted to understand it right. So as many as 37 out of 100 children who lives in orphanages may suffer violence. Is that while they're in their orphanage? Okay.
Yeah, that live in orphanages.
Okay.
After they go out, it's even more.
Do you think so? Perhaps because they're super vulnerable and looking for love and acceptance and all of those stuff. But that's, so literally if you walk into an orphanage of 100 children, you can expect 37 of them are suffering violence or abuse from adults or from other children. It's crazy. So.
That's heartbreaking.
And so it took us 8 years to learn what God already put in the Bible. So a lot of times the answers we're looking for are already there. God sets the lonely in families. He decided that a long time ago, that the best place for vulnerable children and vulnerable people is in a family atmosphere and with community. So just in case you were wondering. All right. Let me get my notes up here. So I wanted to share a story that helped spur us on to community mapping and why we started it. And just a little clause before I jump in, we are just now learning and starting community mapping, so we are not experts. I don't know why Catherine asked me to do this. No, I'm kidding. Because nobody else is doing community mapping yet in Honduras that we know of. Actually, it's a huge thing. I talked to a lady that lives in some Latin America country, and Argentina, and she works with CAFO, Christian Alliance for Orphans, which is an awesome conference if you can ever get to the States in May. And we talked about this, and she said in Argentina, I think it's Argentina.
It's Argentina. Well, you told me Argentina.
Oh, good. Oh, I've told you this. You remember things so well. I don't even remember what I told you. Okay. And we were chatting about community mapping, and I was like, and she's like my go-to resource because CAFO as an alliance has all this knowledge of resources and things people have already done all over the world globally. And so I just like, hey, don't you have a software for community mapping? Like, just hand it over. I just need that to get started. She's like, are you kidding me? She's like, I've been searching for years. Nobody has done this in Argentina, and we're desperate for it. And I was like, shut up. So I was just really sad but I'm sure it does exist. We just haven't found it. Anyway, or we're going to create it. Anyway, all that to say, there's a lot to learn, but you'll get the concept and you can take it and use it in however you want to. But this reintegration story kind of is what has got our mind starting on what we could do to help support these children as they go back. And so Rebecca was, and she's the little baby in the picture, she was one of our foster children for a while. I personally had her for like 2 weeks, and she would not take a bottle. And we went through all kinds of craziness. So she had a very rough start as a newborn. And then she entered one of our foster families after I'd had her for we just do like emergency while a family's getting ready. And so this is the foster mom that she was with, who's an amazing woman who got her to drink that bottle. And so when Rebecca was up for reintegration, it was with her aunt and 2 young women, I think an 18-year-old and a 15-year-old. That's who lived in the house, and then the 18-year-old had a baby. And so she got reintegrated into that family because her aunt petitioned for the reintegration and wanted her. And so this mom, the foster mom, followed up along with our caseworker, went and visited the family to see how Rebecca was doing because she had so many allergies and difficulties. The aunt couldn't read, so they had to make these charts of the food she could and couldn't eat and things like that. And so just keeping up with her and everything. And she lives up in La Esperanza in a poor mountain village. And so our caseworker, as she was doing the follow-up visits, realized there was nowhere this aunt could turn if she needed some assistance. Actually, the aunt ended up not even taking care of Rebecca really well, but the 18-year-old does. And so just trying to support this poor mountain family from 2 hours, an hour and a half away, and just keep her from re-entering the system, right? Like she needs this permanency. And so within the first month, Rebecca lost 5 pounds. And we got really nervous that she was going to have to come back. Not that we minded taking her back, but obviously if there's somebody that cares for her and loves her, we just want to empower them to take care of her. And that was the 18-year-old that also had her own baby. And so what our caseworker, Becky, ended up finding was a Centro de Salud, a little health center office right there where they could go and get vaccinations and stuff whenever they were open. And so Becky partnered with that health center and not only started a system where they had to bring Rebecca every week to get weighed and checked on to make sure she didn't reach didn't reach a emergency
Dangerous level.
level where we needed to get her out or she was going to, be malnourished and sickly and maybe not live. And so we did this partnership with the Centro de Salud, and it turned into an entire community program where Becky will go. Moms didn't even know what their babies were. So there's no, they don't have internet. They can't look these things up. They can't read, so they can't get a book on baby development. And so they started doing these stages of development trainings so the moms could know, oh, my baby needs to start eating solid foods. My baby can't drink milk until 1, cow's milk, and things like that. So simple. And it took Becky, like 1 day out of her month to go up there, and it saved, literally saved kids from malnourishment or diarrhea or whatever could be the cause of them not eating proper foods for their age group. And so it was just huge and beautiful, and we loved it. So, and still praying for Rebecca, but she's doing okay. And so that led us to say, okay, so our kids that come into our foster care system are gonna most likely go back to biological family. How can we support them? We're only a staff of 10. There's only 2 caseworkers in that region. How can they run an hour and a half up the mountain and really support a kid? What are we going to do? And then on top of that, the government has done a big push for reintegration from the orphanages. And so all of these children from orphanages are going back into bio families, which sounds wonderful unless the family is not safe or healthy or able to take care of their children. Then what happens? The kids just suffer because they come back into the orphanage because mom and dad couldn't take care of them, or they were found neglected and malnourished again 5 months later. And we've heard these stories over and over from this push for reintegration. And so we have a group, an OVC group, Orphanage Vulnerable Children, anybody that works with orphans or vulnerable children group, that we get together and we just, have all these stories. And let's say an orphanage in Tegus, their kid goes all the way back to La Ceiba. They can't drive 6-7 hours to follow up. Our welfare office doesn't have the staff or the vehicles to do follow-up. So kids are basically just put back into families with the hope that everything goes well, right? And so those lack of services from the welfare office and even from small organizations just cause a huge problem for kids going back to unsafe situations and just returning into the system, which causes all kinds of trauma for them. So does that kind of set a good platform for mapping? So this was something that we just started to talk about in our OVC group, that what if we mapped the services available for families? So again, say that orphanage's kid goes back to La Ceiba. What if they could just pull up a map, find Ceiba, and say, okay, this kid needs an after-school program because I know mom and dad work until 7, 8 at night. And this 5-year-old cannot be at home by himself or whatever. Just throwing stuff out there. And so they can pull that up, and they can pull up Oficinas de Apoyo, Educación, sorry, English, help offices. Education, you need that one, I'm sure. And they can say, oh, Compassion International has after-school programs in partnership with the church. They actually have 200 in Honduras. Did you know that?
No.
Yep.
Wow.
And so, right. And so they can pull that up in Ceiba, find that after-school program, give that contact to the family, talk to the program and say, hey, this family should be arriving. Let me know if they're not. And through that church after-school program with Compassion International, they can know that their kid's doing okay. And we're going to talk about a curriculum that actually y'all can use back and forth to know quickly if they're doing okay. We're going to talk about that during our workshop. So does that make sense? And so with something as simple as, well, it's not simple, but it is simple. The concept is simple. As this, you've just helped an at-risk family keep their kid longer and hopefully forever, because that kid won't come back into the system because there's an after-school program. Now, the other purpose, well, I'll go there in a minute. The other purpose would be, what if there is no after-school program? Which is going to be more likely the case in almost every situation that we're looking for to support a family that gets their kids. Then you have that information as well. And we're going to talk about what you can do with that information in a minute. So let me hear some ideas. How does this help you guys so far? What are you thinking? Does this spur anything for what your programs are in Lithuania? How could this help any of your cases that you have right now?
Well, as for myself, we in Lithuania, we used to work actually with refugees and did not sort of a map like this to help their integration. So it's relevant. That's what I'm trying to say.
Good. Thank you. That's so good to hear.
I'm just thinking right now, you know, my mind is always spinning about how to keep developing. But actually, it's interesting because for me, it's not just about finding out what is actually there. It's also about finding out what's not there and to encourage the people that are looking for ministries or that really want to reach out and help and say, hey, this is a focus area that is really, really important.
Uh-huh.
And so I think it's super important to not just only map what is actually already existing, but
Right.
also what are the needs.
Right, right. And that's what gets you, this would get you to that, because then you can say, okay, this is available. What do I need? So give me one case you're with right now of a woman you're trying to empower.
That's women.
Well, that's fine.
We have a very good system like this mapping of mental care. For example, if you're
Sweet.
experiencing crisis, you have a lot of phone numbers you can
Perfect.
search. Also places where you can go, psychological support, emotional support via phone or online. So yeah, so it's quite good because we
That's
have
amazing.
a big problem in Lithuania with suicide rates. They are quite high. That's why, you know, we had to develop some kind of system to avoid this final decision.
That's
of committing
amazing.
suicide. So mental health care system is working on that very, very much.
Are you making notes? Let's add mental health care to this. Because we have like salud, but it's more like where to get vaccinations. Because it's more kid is what we're thinking, but that would be amazing.
But that would be amazing, but I'm just thinking that's 10 years out in the future.
That we,
Where will we get all that healthcare from?
oh, that we don't have it.
Well, we don't have it, but also...
Yeah, but there are a couple. There's a place here in Tegus. I mean, there's no phone numbers. There's no hotlines.
Yeah, we have.
But that could be
But
a-
that could be something else. I think the phone numbers...
Call lines are very popular in Lithuania. We have for children, for youth, for women, for parents, for seniors, for.
Yeah, we don't have any of that yet, but
Casa Mujer, the government program, is in some cities.
the
For
what?
psychological help.
There is some cycle.
Yeah, for mothers.
I imagine they're in the bigger cities for mothers.
Yeah.
I actually don't know.
I'm gonna
Do
write
you
that
know
down
if
too.
Ciudad Mujer, sí. But do you know if the women's offices in each alcaldía,
No.
Oficina de Mujer,
No.
if they would have that? Okay.
Just Ciudad Mujer in San Pedro, in Choloma, and
Yeah, I can
Tegucigalpa.
So you hop on there and you add those for me.
See, Tara's always working.
Looking for ideas. Like I said, we just started this, so it's really
And
tough.
giving work too.
Yeah.
Yes, and giving work.
I have one question. You mentioned about the software tools for community mapping, and you said they're not available.
That I know of.
That you know of.
Did you make it, Chris?
Do you?
I might. I know how to do that.
Thank you.
That would be amazing. So right now,
What
you
would
can
you
see
need?
we're just using Google Maps. What did he say?
What would you need?
What would you need?
Okay, well, let's talk about that. So, skip. So right now, we hired part-time a lady that has a social work. It's not even a degree, it's just like a certification. So she's just really good at researching and going and asking questions and yada, yada. So she uses Google Maps. So she just sticks it on there. You know, I can pop it up, I can click that, and it pops up the phone number and contact information, which is great. But my vision would be, obviously a search engine would be to click on an area and click health and just the health pop up. So instead of this, I mean, it's functionable, but just something a little easier to use.
Okay.
Yeah. But this is what I want that's really a little more advanced.
Yeah.
And we haven't talked about this yet, but specific for us is orphan care, obviously. So I would like to pop up the orphanages in Tegucigalpa. And then I'd like to pop up one, and then I'd like to, what we want to get to is where we see where those kids came from. So say this orphanage has 100 kids and 45 are from Talanga. Then I know that I need to get to Talanga and do something, because that's where a lot of my kids are coming from and entering the system. And I can go see and survey their families, hopefully, in a perfect world, and say, okay, all these families, the dad has alcohol issues. Not all of them. I'm making stuff up, but you get the idea. So I know there I'm going to start alcohol, all of that. Does that make sense? So, and they don't have to be one and the same, but that's kind of the idea.
Yeah, but sort of separate, like back end to see what's going on, right?
Yes.
In the big picture. It's not necessarily for everybody to see, but only for you.
For the orphan care,
layers.
yes, different layers is perfect. We would like to be able for it to be something we can present to the welfare office. So when they do a reintegration, because not every NGO is going to follow up with their kids, unfortunately. And the welfare office, when the parents are sitting right in their thing and they're getting their kids, they can say, what are some of the needs in your area? And they could pop up after school programs or whatever. So it'd have to be simple enough that they would use it. So an app would be amazing. So if your brain is there, like I can't even think of what all I want because I don't think technologically. I'm a lot older than I look. No, I'm kidding. Just kidding. There were no cell phones when I was in college. Okay, but anyway, that would be amazing. That's something this works for now. It gets us forward.
And it's not that difficult to do.
And it's Google Maps, so everybody can use it. But it would be nice. And I'm sure there's other things we would think of that we would want that we don't even know we want yet. But who is this guy? Are you keeping him for a while?
He's staying.
Can you hide his passport? Just stick it somewhere. That would be really cool. Okay, thank you. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing of God's world is we create something here in Honduras, you guys can use it in Lithuania and vice versa. So it's just creating a platform that everybody can run with and see God's kids and women better taken care of, right? Are we yelling? Are we good? I don't know what time it is, so you tell me when it's coffee break.
In about 10 minutes, it's coffee.
Do you want to do it now? Does that mess you up? I'm at a good spot.
Let me just check with her. So just breathe for a second.
Y'all tell me a couple other things you do, so that'll help me know if I can.
I think we can use this in Lithuania when working with youth coming from detention centers.
Great.
Youth prisons. Those who go out of
Great.
prison, they also go back to the system of meeting their bad influence, and they go back to prison.
Right.
They have something like that with health facilities. I think.
Perfect.
You can also mention.
I think we.
It's amazing.
can do it.
White label solution.
And I'm sure you've thought about this, but the map would help too. Something.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Is if you've got businesses that are willing. So this is just something I worked in social services in the States for just a tiny little summer. We had a list. I mean, it wasn't a map, but maps are always fun. We had a list of businesses that were willing to take youth coming out of the detention center. And so that's all the different fields. And you can pop up who's willing in the community to take those workers.
Can you?
We can wing it.
Next thing, and then because
They're telling me stories. We're good.
Oh, great.
We can keep telling me stories.
It's actually not until 10.
Okay, I can keep going then.
Okay.
I don't know what time it is, but that sounds good. Let's keep going. It's 10:27 on this computer. It's 11:17 on my computer. 10:27 on this computer. Just
So I
FYI.
have a question.
It's 9:17.
I'm just letting you know why I'm confused at the time.
That's the real time.
have a question. So
You're
this,
on my phone right now.
so these centers, these institutions themselves, they are not putting themselves on the map in Google Map, for example. It's
Like the
not-
orphanages or
themselves, just
anybody?
Everyone would be informed just to put themselves.
I mean,
on
that's
Google Maps.
that's actually really
Because,
good.
for example, in Lithuania, in Europe, I don't know, in general, we have all these
How to tell them to
institutions
put
putting
themselves on there. That's
Yeah.
actually good. I wonder how
So-
we could do that.
We just need to think about the way how to inform them that they need to do that, so you wouldn't be, responsible for.
Can I just keep all of them just for a while?
No, but this is what happens to, I don't know, in Lithuania. All the institutions, all the healthcare, education, I don't know, after school, everything, they are putting themselves just to promote their
Great.
that they are there. So
I mean, that feels sometimes even for a small place like Siguatepeque,
it's
the education board can just announce, "Hey, go here,
Yeah.
register yourself, put there if you have any specialties or
You can
whatever."
just prepare like a small leaflet and go to institutions and leave it to the
It's a very good
secretary
idea.
And how to do that,
It's a very good idea. It's perfect. Because yeah, it takes a long time for one woman to go because we want to find out if schools will take kids on a scholarship. So say these daycares, there's hardly any daycares, number one, and that's a huge problem of why children get put in the system because mom goes to work and leaves them at home because that's all she can do. So not only are there hardly any daycares, there's also no free daycares or daycares for underprivileged families. And so we want to see if some daycares that do exist will give scholarship, 5 kids on scholarship. And so then that could be on here, that information. And so,
And Tara, I'm thinking even if we recognize what are the needs more specific, it will actually also be easier for us maybe to go fundraise directly for that specific need if the daycares can't give them the scholarships directly.
right.
Because it's just easy to say, oh, there's just so many moms that has many kids that doesn't know what to do with them, so they end up in the orphan system. But I know that there's so many people that has hearts for these youth, for these kids and for these moms, these
Right.
young moms. So if there's like a more specific saying, hey, there's actually this daycare that are willing to take in at-risk kids
right,
if we find these scholarships.
right.
So even that way around, we will be able to help and canalize
Exactly.
it better.
Exactly. It's very good. Something we just came across too because of the lack of daycares. Carlos is going to give you a great story, but I won't share that one. But some of our foster moms are willing to be a caretaker for kids during the day. And so I think all the times because of where we're from developed countries. Lithuania is a developed country, yes. No.
Well, they in
Black and
the
white.
EU, so maybe something.
I don't. Remember, it took me 8 years to learn Honduras. I'm like, to have no concept of global stuff. So, but because we come from these developed countries, we think immediately buildings, daycare building, right? Orphanage, and we forget family. We forget that the neighbor can take care of the child so the single mom can go work. Like we forget these pieces. And I think the Lord's been bringing us back down to that and helping us to realize the answer's right there. We don't have to raise tons of money and build big solutions. There are solutions around us. And we're going to talk more about that with using the church. But I won't get ahead of myself.
Just after that, we're also with the organization. We're part of one program where we're not doing the community mapping yet, but it's a sports-related project where we're gonna map the game zones, the publicly accessible game zones, where kids and other people can have access to free practices.
Oh, cool.
So this is also in a way like the neighborhood involvement. So there's one person. Sports is a very good tool for integration, like for just keeping people busy.
Right.
So if there's one sports
on here too.
that is responsible.
I think they're giving the workshop today. That's great.
Yeah, that is responsible for the game zone, and the map itself could have the schedule, could have the
when it's
sports.
free to book, maybe even
Yeah, the sport itself listed like which sport is gonna take place in that game zone on that time, etc., etc. So this is what we're gonna do in Lithuania. We're actually on the way. It's actually in partnership with one of the Danish NGOs. So
It's amazing.
it's really
It's amazing.
Denmark involved. That's good.
And that's where I think I'll go ahead and jump. We'll come back to this real quick. I want to jump to the church because you keep giving me points. So that's again where the church comes in. So we do everything we do through the local church. So when we recruit foster families, it's in the church. My husband goes and speaks to the church about foster care, what it means. We do all of our training in the church buildings. They let us use their building, so we don't have to build a building. And then they help us with some of our family preservation projects. And they actually, another thing that's slow going, we're trying to get the churches to partner with the orphanages because most of the orphanages are run by North American missionaries. A couple Spain, one Switzerland. I'm trying, but mostly North American missionaries. And so, and they bring mission teams, right? Which can have a wonderful part to it, but for the most part, it's hurting the kids because they're just getting new relationships that then leave and they're having other attachment issues, right? And so we're trying to get the local church to partner with the orphanage and do all those activities so that they have a contact in the community after they age out. Anyway, so every program, and that's what we call our mentor program. They mentor the kids in orphanages. And so everything we've done is through the church. And so through that, we've started to realize that they're also the solution for so much more. So like this game thing, when I think about it, I'm like, I can't start a program to run kids around Siguatepeke to the games, but the churches could because they come to us and they say, hey, we need a new project. We just got a van and we want to bring kids to church. I'm like, oh, do you also want to take them to, I mean, that just made me think of that. Like, and they would, and keep kids out of trouble and all that good stuff, which is great. So your church can be a huge solution, your local churches, of just filling those gaps and those needs. One church we know did run a daycare for a while, and we're trying to help them start it back. But they did where each at-risk family that had kids in the daycare had to be in a disciple relationship with one family from the church. And so they had this relationship and this partnership where they were just able to minister and be involved in their lives and stuff like that. And so again, just connecting anybody that's struggling with, someone that can invest in their life. It doesn't always have to be a huge program or organization. But the church, I don't know how can you brainstorm how the church, what is some solutions you're looking for or programs you're trying to grow? How could you use the church that maybe you haven't thought about before?
In my opinion, we are communicating more with NGOs because we have a lot, and church is responsible more for example, anonymous alcoholics. All these people who have some troubles, like homeless people. So in Lithuania is more like this, but we have a lot of NGOs, so we are more working
with that.
Actually, I think it's not only about looking at the church, of course, because we're Christian organizations, we have our focus on the church because that's where we give our spiritual growth. But I think it's for those that maybe not are connected with the church environment, maybe thinking in where do you find those volunteers? Because basically it's the volunteer basis. In Denmark we have a volunteer heart. When we go to school, we do volunteering. When we start studying, we are obligated to volunteer. Basically, when we look for a job, if you have nothing about volunteering on your curriculum, for you to get that job is going to be difficult because they want to see that you can give without receiving. And so I think maybe for you guys that are not involved with churches, it's also maybe to see, okay, where are the volunteer heart? What are the people? It could be the university as well. Or it could even be in the local soccer club that you... I don't know, in Lithuania, the people are they volunteers to trainers? Are they paid?
You mean in this program that we're having?
Mm-hmm.
Or
yeah.
It's volunteer,
okay.
Volunteer based?
Because that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Where do you find those trainers? Well, it's people that has a heart for helping these kids get soccer practice.
They keep them motivated. Yeah, it's a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah. So it's just about thinking out of the box and where are those volunteers?
Yeah, that's great. A big, and I mean, like it's as simple as we do a snack time after church, and people can come by and sign up for either of the 3 programs and learn. So you may not be able to recruit an entire church, but like she said, you can get volunteers. The biggest thing for us, and this may be totally different in Lithuania though, but for Honduras, all of the NGOs are again usually based out of another country, not out of Honduras. And so what we noticed, especially from working in the orphanages, is even NGOs came and went. And so they'd start this program and then felt like they did 5 years of good work and go, and they leave a community without that program, whereas a church almost always is there until the last member. They don't ever want to close the doors, right? And so that was part of the reasoning behind, and we just heard really, when we went to conferences and researched and stuff, a lot of people talked about use the local church, and we're like, well, what's the local church got to do with orphan care, or whatever? And so it really was a game changer for us, because everything we're building, if we build it correctly through the church or NGOs that are local and going to be sustained, then our work, even if we were to leave, not yet, but eventually, if we were for some reason not to keep ministering in a certain region, that church would keep doing it if we really sold it well. And they get involved in orphans. Once you're involved in orphans or at-risk families, people that really need your ministry, it's hard to leave it. And so when a church that gets that rooted into, for us, orphan care, if we leave, they're still going to be supporting those kids in that orphanage or at-risk families. Does that make sense? And so there are some churches that have started that I haven't talked to them in 6 months, and they're still visiting that orphanage, and they can sustain it. So basically it becomes an outreach of what you're doing, and then you don't even have to almost touch it. So it makes your work sustainable to plant it in local church, local volunteers, local NGO. The church has been that for us. And sometimes it's hard to think outside of your program. How do I put this program through a church? But I promise it's worth all the hard work. It's like pulling teeth sometimes. Do y'all have that phrase? Yeah. Pulling teeth? It's like pulling teeth sometimes. But once it's rooted and planted, that church runs with it. And then we're like we have one church in Cihuatepeque, and every time a family gets a foster kid, they throw like a welcome party, and then they do birthday parties for them. They went and paid the medical bill for one of our foster kids before we could even get there and pay for it. And so therein, our work is even more sustainable because we don't have to pull money from the U.S. as much. We want to get that more and more, but we'll get there. And that also, and it may be different for you guys because we're, an NGO from another country, but working in Honduras, but the more and more you can get it rooted in its own people, its own country, the more it'll actually make the lasting change. You don't have to keep pulling from other places, but it takes time. It takes time. So we do know an organization, it took them 10 years in Costa Rica. Costa Rica is a little more wealthy than Honduras, but it took 10 years, but they operate all of their costs except for 30% out of Costa Rican money, like the churches mostly. And that's where we kind of stole the model. Not kind of, we totally stole their model to work through churches. But it's amazing. It took them 10 years, so we still have some time, Carlos, to convince the churches to pay. Casa Viva.
Pura vida.
And it's Pura Vida there. My sister lives in Costa Rica. She loves it. All right. So let's talk a little bit about mapping. Some of this stuff is very basic, but just to get you your jump start and you can run with it. This is how we started, so it can just get your juices flowing and take and pick what would fit for you where you are right now. So we just picked a region. So we picked Cihuatepeque because our biggest group is there. We created a small team. There's just 4 of us that get together regularly and talk about mapping, and there's only one lady that actually does the legwork, like I mentioned, and she's just contracted out, actually. She's not part of the staff or anything. We just asked her to start doing this because it's her background. And so she's our point person, social worker if possible. I don't know if there'd be any other degree that would make more sense, but as far as what we found, it's the best for. She just gets out there and finds all the stuff.
I think for the area that you're looking for, like within child care, yeah.
She's the best. Mm-hmm. And your work, can you think of anybody else that they would want to seek out? If they went home and wanted to do this today, who would they seek out to do the actual legwork? Would it be?
Well, it could be, yeah, or it could be a what is it called? Anthropologist?
Sociologist.
An anthropologist, yeah.
Psychologist.
Would probably be the best solution actually, because they are looking, well, depending on how, if you want to do statistics, if you want to
Yeah.
look into what has actually created this culture, and so it has roots and not just it's a pin in a map.
Right.
They will probably be the best people, I think.
Perfect. Do we have any of those here?
Yeah,
Do you know anybody?
I do, but she's Danish.
But she's here?
But she's here.
Okay, let's talk. Because
Networking and that's nice.
we should not get together more than
Yeah, no,
4 times a year.
yeah.
We just give each other more work. All right. No, it's fabulous. I'm just kidding. That would be cool. I mean, we are looking to hire. So we just hired her part-time. Let's just get started and see what this feels like and see how it develops. Because literally we have searched for some program already created, some book to read, and we haven't found anything. There's could be something out there, and my resources have been depleted. But so that would be great, because we would consider hiring somebody full-time to run with it afterwards and make it everything, and talk to the software developer and all of those good things.
Like tomorrow, right?
By tomorrow.
Yeah.
No, I need to rest a little bit.
No, but Chris, he's up all night. You can make that.
Oh, good. He's got this.
Give me a computer.
Okay. Obviously, we talked about that we started with Google Maps, but we want something better. And then we can talk about kind of what the timeline. Again, we're just, if somebody like UNICEF or USAID, or who's the big organization in Lithuania?
Red Cross.
Red Cross. If somebody like them wanted to take this up, they could probably knock it out in a year and start in every region and just do it. Obviously, we don't have that.
No, but we have you guys, so don't worry.
But we're going to be faithful for what God's given us, and we started. And so that's how we started. The map you saw is exactly what we have right now. And our goal would be these phases. So our first phase is where we are right now. We're just identifying what's available. We're going to add mental health services right there. It's not concrete.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
it's the next door neighbor.
so you can see that, and then, or you saw that on the map. And then our phase 2 would be how are we going to share and promote not just what we're doing with the mapping, but we can go ahead for Siguatepeque, for the region we decided to start with, and raise awareness for the lack of services. And so because we've been working there already for almost 5 years, we know we need daycares. We know we need this. We know we need that. After school programs. I don't even know if we have a compassion center. Are you videoing me right now?
I'm taking a photo of
Oh,
you.
good.
Yeah,
Don't put that. Compassion might come back and be like, okay. Because I don't know. I need it.
What do
anyway.
you have?
I was saying in Siguatepeque, I don't know if we have after-school programs. I know Comiagua has compassion after-school programs. Anyway, so, sorry.
I know people that could be interested in making them.
Okay, so that's the idea. Even while we're still developing software in the map for all of nationwide, for all of Honduras, we want to start working where we are, because we need solutions now for our families and our program in our area. And so we would already go ahead and start raising awareness for what we're doing with the mapping, why it's important, how it's going to help, and then go ahead and see if we can fill some of those needs. We have what we call Mesa de Protección, who basically get together, take a video, and eat. But we don't take that outside this room. But Jorge's on it, so God bless them. It's a bunch of local authority level. The mayor runs it. People, my husband gets to sit on it, which is fabulous. DNAF is on it. And the idea, I think the president established it, maybe, because it's a newer thing.
It sounds like something that he could have thought of. Yeah.
And it's a fabulous idea. It's an absolutely fabulous idea. It's exactly what we're doing with our OVC group, but it's with local level authority people who actually could, implement some new things, new laws.
Explain more. I really didn't get it.
So it's local level authority people. So the mayor's on there, a representative from the welfare office is on there, a representative from NGO, which is my husband.
Municipalities, something
Yes,
like this?
yes. A representative from the police, probably. I don't even know who's on the education board. They have the whole education board of people. He's on there, or she, I don't know. And so there's like 10 people on there of your local authority people, and they could get so much done together. But they haven't yet. Like we could go to them and say, hey, we've got this thing going on for this reason, the mapping, and we've noticed, and we can show them our results. This is all the services available, but these are the services that are missing that we know our region needs, like daycares or whatever. And then we know there's money that the mayor has that he's supposed to spend on certain projects. So then we could even have a presentation where, hey, we will pay half as identity mission. Can you support the other half or give us a free building to use for the after school program or whatever, right? And so we can go ahead and start to develop ways to use the information and get some needs met. We can call a community meeting. I have no idea how to do that and see what the heck it, but we'll figure it out. I think in little towns it's easier to call a community meeting. Get on the radio, get on TV, make a campaign about, what did y'all say? Something about the sports thing. Make a campaign, or do the little flyers in the education system. Talk to that lady, hey, will you just tell everybody to register on the map? And then we advance our work, and don't have to do, like you said, all that. Our OVC group, and then obviously our churches, we can present to any of our churches that partner with us already, hey, this is really a need, or these 5 needs are huge needs in our community. Could you fill any part of them? Or could you 3 churches together, because they have like their denominational groups, could you 3 together fill this need? And then you have real information, and churches and your NGOs don't just keep running their wheels trying to find out how to really solve problems in the community, right? I mean, we're talking big. It feels big, but it actually is real legit steps that could happen. And we feel like the map is what could uphold all that information and people start to understand. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then our phase 3 is what I mentioned to you earlier. We want to discover the roots of orphanhood in each region. So we want to look, and that's where it gets bigger. We want to so then we'll map all the orphanages, even foster care, all the foster care. Where do these kids come from, and why are they entering the system? And so we can find out, okay, so for Siguatepeque, the root cause of family breakdown, why kids enter the system, I believe, is lack of daycare services from my experiences there. And so we hopefully could pinpoint that. And like Identity Mission's not going to travel all over Honduras and do this. Catherine's going to do it in Tegucigalpa. But we're going to give her the platform, right? We're going to say, we've got through this. Here, you do it in Tegus. And she'll be able to do it in Tegus. She'll be able to do this in Tegus. And then she'll be able to do this in Tegus. Like, that's the idea, that we spread it among the NGOs, the work, but we're going to give them the model, right?
Yeah, well, I'm expensive,
We have to talk to Jesus about that. All right. So then we can find out. And I'm such a... this is the way my brain works, and you'll just have to forgive me. I think it's my gift, faith. I think if we figure this out, we can solve Honduras's orphanhood problems. Maybe not in my lifetime, but that's what I really believe. That if I know why families are breaking down and kids are entering the system, and I can help local NGOs and churches start the program that's causing that family breakdown, I can keep those kids from coming in and keep those families together. It may not work for all 150,000 orphans in Honduras, but what if it works for 100,000 of them, right? So that's just the way my brain works. So y'all can have that faith with me, but in Lithuania, right? So y'all together with that? It's going to work. All right. That's just the same thing. What region are most of these kids coming from? And then getting to those core issues. And you'd be shocked at how many times in a year I hear about another missionary family alliance thing. We meet new missionaries and they're like so excited. They're in Honduras. They have a nonprofit. They're doing this, and this. And they struggle for, just like us, 5 to 8 years trying to figure out how to do it well. Or after 3 years, they're like, I'm not making any changes. There's no results. And how maybe this information could help them come, to Tegucigalpa and say, I want to work with orphans instead of building an orphanage, which, believe it or not, I hear about 5 times a year somebody's building a new orphanage. And I call him and I talk to him and tell him no. But how much better if I have this information? So I'm not just going to say, don't build an orphanage, it's horrible. I can say, but we need a teen center to keep kids from, whatever. We need, so if you love kids, this is what you can do in this region because it's what's needed. And give them all of the research and all the map and all the information. Then maybe we can encourage people to do what really needs to be done. Because again, the hearts are almost 100% always on target. It's models that we have to work on. That's my plug for that. Any questions on, and this is, again, not extensive. We've just started. This is where we've gotten to, where we are. So how could this look different for what you guys are doing? Anybody got ideas?
So at which stage are you now? Phase 1.
So this is all vision. But something that led us to this, and this might click for some of you, something that led us, it all just came, you know how the Lord does that. You got this and this and this, and then one day you wake up and it's like, wow, this goes together. So all these problems, how do we fix them? And I feel like the map is going to be huge for that. This came from the realization that a huge grant, I don't even know the name of the organization or the entity, government entity in Canada, huge grant came in for that reintegration push for DNAF, our welfare office. They sent tons of money. DNAF had to get numbers to them, so they sent tons of kids to families. And some of them didn't go to safe families, and none of them were followed up on. And so we're like, okay, we don't have that kind of money to do a big push for something, deinstitutionalization or whatever, foster care across the country, okay? But we're here and we're on the ground. Canada doesn't even, like that I think it was a government entity, doesn't even know what's really going on. They don't know those kids went to unsafe families. So where is the breakdown? What can we do to move it up? So basically I felt like it was like this level triangle. And at the top is UNICEF and whoever y'all said for Lithuania. We're little NGOs down here doing little things, but in the middle, I feel like it is the local authority. So like if something big happens here in Tegus, all the regions let's talk welfare again, all the regions get that information, they get that money, it kind of funnels down. But that gap in the middle, we're not, for the most part, NGOs do not engage the local authority. So I felt like that's where we had our gap in getting, because we're figuring out what really works. You can't just reintegrate a kid. You need a follow-up program. But DNAF is getting all that stuff from the top. They don't know they need a follow-up program because they never got the training in it, right? But if we could get them that information, then they're getting the money, they're getting the right information on top of it, and then they can do the right things. Does that make sense? And so that engaging of the local authority, I feel like us NGOs, FBOs, you know what FBOs are? I just learned that, faith-based organizations. So NGOs that aren't faith-based call us something else. We're FBOs. FYI, if you ever hear that. I just learned that. Anyway, NGOs, FBOs, I feel like, small NGOs, right? I feel like we are dropping the ball on engaging judges. No judges know how to do a proper reintegration. They don't know what a transition plan is, believe it or not. I know I talk a lot of orphan care. I hope it can relate to what you're doing. But what if we, who have the training, we train our caseworkers, our foster families, our churches on transition and trauma and all this stuff, but these judges who are making these big decisions for the kids don't have any of that training because we haven't been engaging them. And so instead of expecting UNICEF, I keep using UNICEF, but that's the big one here, and instead of expecting them to get the right information to everybody, why don't we do it? Because they got the money and they're just going to pour the money because they need results and they need numbers so they can keep getting their money. Not saying that everything they do is not done well, but they're not on the ground. They're in an office, right? So we're on the ground, so we have the real information of what works and doesn't work with struggling mamas and orphans, right? So if we train those local authorities, if we engage them, if they start getting awareness that, these kids aren't bad kids, they just don't have what they need. These parents aren't bad parents, they just don't have resources. You're not providing them community services. So anyway, that's kind of where that came together. And I feel like this is going to help us fill that gap of how do we engage. I mean, I can go knock on the mayor's door, but he's not going to listen to me unless I have some legit information. And if he can see his whole town mapped out and the services he's not providing for his citizens, I'm not going to say it like that, right? But we're going to talk partnership. Right.
I'm not saying anything, but
Right. Right. So how can we do this together? How can we fill these things? Any questions or any other ideas of how you can use this or change it just to help each other get, the wheels turning? Okay. All right. So your workshop for today, or your first workshop for today, is about the CSI, the Child Status Index. We are struggling so bad. Has anybody?
Put a sign up, no drinks here.
No drinks allowed anymore. Has anybody ever heard of CSI? Can y'all see that? Can we see it? Okay.
CSI, yeah.
Not the show? Yeah. Nice. Okay. So it's just a tool that was developed to help monitor children in programs or in communities. It's just very tangible, and it's easy to share the information. Like, somebody doesn't have to know your program or your models or anything like that. It's easy to share how a child is doing, or a family, using this tool. So I just wanted to introduce it to you, and I can walk you through it, and then you can take it from there if you feel like it would be relevant or work in any of your programs. You can use it for case management, which Carlos is going to jump into case management with you guys after myself. You can use it just for monitoring how a child is doing, how, developing things like that. It's not for targeting, which is like choosing children to be in your program. It's not for that. And it's not for broad evaluation. Like, we wouldn't use it to evaluate how Honduras is doing in a certain area. Like, you wouldn't use it broadly. And there's more. I won't go too in depth. There's a whole website on it, and that's what I gave you. And there's several manuals and things like that. So I'll let you kind of read in depth. We have not started using it yet. So again, I come to you a little vulnerable with information that I think will help you, but that I maybe won't be able to answer all your questions on. Okay, just because we just started. Carlos and I have been reading it, researching it, learning the material, and all of that. And we really hope it'll be good for our programs. That is the website. I guess she can send you this presentation too afterwards, but basically Measure Evaluation is I don't know if it's a company or organization, but they have it on their thing. So if you look up Child Status Index, CSI, you'll eventually get to this. So
Together with your presentation, we'll put up your slides.
Perfect. And so you guys can have it right there. Check it. All right. So,
do you want this down, or is it short what you're going to say?
I don't know, it's up to them how well they can see it.
it's okay.
It's okay now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so just to tie it in, per se, after mapping, when we want to zone in on the regions that we know a lot of children enter the system from, and we want to find out what's the root cause, why does this community have a lot of children entering the system? And so we could go there and we could monitor and evaluate that area using this tool. Carlos can talk about how you can use it in family preservation as well. And so our caseworkers can use it. I'm not going to read all this to you. The thing I like about this is it's so simple. One of my thoughts and hopes is that, so we have like the churches that partner with us. Some of them also commit to like volunteer in the orphanage, like I said, or volunteer in a family preservation, which means they'll be working in a poor community with us. But they're all your everyday people, teachers, store owners, they're just normal everyday people. They have no psychology background. They have no social worker degree or anything like that. So how can we empower them or equip them when they go into these poor communities to, number one, not freak out at every poor child filled with scabies and lice? How can they know what is a dire situation and needs reporting and what is just normal poverty kind of thing. And so how can we equip them to know better what's going on in a situation in a household? And so they can use this tool. So like other donors, community organizations, any partners, they can use this tool when they go in to kind of have a better eye for what's really going on in that family. Is that child really at risk? How can they help? You know, those kind of things. And then there's all other ways. You see the monitoring and evaluation. We can teach our staff, for example, with Rebecca, the reintegration story I told you. So Becky, there's an actual report that goes with this tool. And so her visitations, obviously we have other documents, but her visitations, so she can monitor how Rebecca's doing. She can also pass on to the health center for the nurse to monitor, so that they have the same tracking tool, so that when Becky is aware that Rebecca was losing weight, with the questions, I'm getting ahead of myself, but you'll understand a little bit more. With the questions that you use with this tool, the health center nurse or whoever would be able to communicate better with Becky to understand exactly what's going on in that family by using this tool. So it would be like a complementary thing to help communication be clearer for understanding the monitoring of a child. Does that make sense? Yep. Great. Got ahead of myself a little bit. So basically there's these areas, the service domain, that the tool goes through. So you can see them, the 1A, food security, nutrition, growth, shelter, care. So these are all of the areas you would monitor when you visit this community or this child or whatnot. And then they break. And so basically how they do it with the tool, I think I have a copy for you. Yeah, I do. How they do it with the tool is, nope, that's mine. These are yours. I don't know if I have a copy of the, no. I'm just going to show you. So there's also CSI Made Easy, which is a super quick way of understanding it. But if you're going to implement it, I strongly suggest reading the whole manual, because I learned a lot more. All right, so it's just a tool. So they have they have a box. And 1 is bad, very bad. 2 is bad, fair, and good. So you see how it's super, super simple. So say a community volunteer was investing in the community, but maybe, you know, maybe they left school at 6th grade, which was the normal. Now it's 7th here. Left school, and they really just don't have this high education. They can't talk psychology terms, you know, but they can do this. And they can monitor that child for you. Something we learned with reintegration, but because we were trying to help equip orphanages that kids were going back to do the follow-up, but not have to, they can't always hire a social worker to do the follow-up. And so one way is you can find a contact person in the community. It might be a school teacher, it might be a nurse, it might just be a mama that loves everybody, and you can equip them with this tool, even if they're not on a high education level, and they can keep up with that for you. You know, I saw so-and-so, so that the orphanage director can stay in touch with that person and get back that report of so-and-so is this week had a very bad for nutrition. And so they can kind of monitor that, and over so many months know what kind of situation the child's in. And the idea is at the end of this, you know, I need to develop a plan for this child to get them back on track and meet with the family and all of that. So this is just a monitoring tool, so you know that you need to make a plan for a child or a family or whoever. I don't know if you can see that very well, but basically that's just all the different areas, that the 6 areas, and it has the pictures. So again, it's made a tool that other people can use, that you can, it's so that you can have somebody, a point person in the community, also using the tool. So that's why there's pictures. And so for them, it's easier to understand. It's a simpler thing so that you can get the accurate information. All right, so let's talk about a real situation so that it makes a little more sense. So let's call her Sarah, and let's say that's her living conditions. Let's say Sarah's mom is one of the moms you've been trying to empower to get on her feet with work or whatever, and she goes to a local feeding program. You want to monitor, because you're working with mom, you want to monitor that mom is actually also taken the steps to really take care of Sarah. So with a worker in the feeding program, you're going to use CSI tool, okay? And you want to make sure, that the mom's upholding her stuff, right? Also, her end of the bargain, so to speak, and taking care of her children or child. Sorry, I'm going to find a page. All right. So here's some of the steps that you would take to do this. So with the feeding program person, you're going to, and you can probably take some of these visits too, but say you live an hour and a half outside of the mountain village, but you or the feeding program point person for you is going to do the assessment visit where she goes into the house. She can make some notes when the kid comes to the program, but she also needs to visit the house. Right? That's a key thing to any social work. You got to actually see where they're living and how things are going. So this manual, I'm not going to get into everything because you guys can read it if you feel like this is something you can do. This manual takes you through how to properly do that visit. So if you get a social worker degree, you learn how to go visit someone's home properly and not just barge in, hey, you feeding your kid? She looks malnourished. Like her hair's getting a little yellow. She's always dirty. What's going on? You have to go in properly, let them keep their dignity. There's ways to do the initial assessment interview. And so this will take you through that. So you may know that, but you have to realize your feeding program point person may not know that. Especially if they're a local, they may just be more casual and not understand, help people keep their dignity. That's the key thing in family preservation that's difficult. You want to help them, but you don't want them to lose their dignity or become dependent, right? And so that kind of takes you through that, but that's kind of the idea. It just goes through how to introduce yourself and how to talk to the primary caregiver. The thing I love about CSI is it gives you the actual questions. So you could ask a 5 or 6-year-old, what did you eat today? Well, mom's already talked to them. Hey, you don't need to be telling people our business. Not everybody needs to know that we don't always have food in the house. They're going to take you away from me and put you in an orphanage if you tell them that you don't get to eat all the time. Mm-hmm. Families have had this conversation. So that 6-year-old who understands that is going to answer, mom made beans and rice and da-da-da-da-da-da, right? So this gives you actual questions. We're going to go through some in a minute that help you, I don't want to say coerce the right information, but ask so that you get real answers. And also so you don't make assumptions that aren't, really there or whatever. So it gives you those questions. It gives you the actual questions for the child caregiver, for the primary caregiver, and then for the child and for the neighbors and things like that. Okay, so it's basically social work job, but in a way that non-social workers can use it. And then it just talks about making sure you're just aware of the environment, okay? And obviously knowing your environment of where you're going to visit and living space is important. So for example here, does everybody know what a pila is? Ha ha ha. I haven't shown them a pila.
We have shown them so many other things. They know what a nacatamal is.
Oh, okay. Okay. No, but we have, every house has a pila, even a house that doesn't need a pila because we have washing machines, has a pila where you wash your clothes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And so, but a lot of them have huge tanks, or what would you call it? Just huge
bathtubs.
Bathtubs. It's not really bathtubs. It's just a huge box, concrete box, to fill up because water goes out here all the time. Well, what is that? Who does that put in danger? Kids, if you're not aware and things like that. And so those are things you can be observant of, that we are observant of for our foster families, and then that you could train mom in, or whatever. Same thing with the buckets. They put the sign of the child drowning in the buckets. Have you ever bought a bucket that has the sign of the child? Yeah. Danger. Okay, anyway. So things like that. That's something in Honduras we had to be aware of when we interview our foster families and do the house assessment. Is their pila safe? So now y'all know what a pila is. Right? Oh. So y'all kind of get the idea. I don't know. Can you tell me, can you think of any of your programs that might anything ringing a bell yet that you might could be like, I would want to assess that child properly, or find a point person that would help me keep up with that child?
I think it's going to be more relevant maybe to our Senegalese and Indian also participants who are going to watch the e-learning platform. In Lithuania, we have also some evaluation systems, but I'm not sure if they are using this one. Who made this system?
I don't know.
You know? I mean, from which country? It's not
Oh, I mean, it's the monitoring evaluation people, yeah, probably, that it came from. The big website is Monitor Evaluation.
Sure.
USAID, Measure, thank you. Measure Evaluation, USAID, and somebody else in the States. Yeah, I think, so for here, this is where it gets relevant. Super, I don't want to say easy, yeah, this is simple, but it's super understandable as as identity mission. If the welfare office reintegrates Rebecca, one of our kids, I can say, right? I have only 10 staff. We have no ministry vehicle. A lot of my caseworkers don't have their own vehicle. Rebecca got reintegrated an hour and a half away. We don't have community programs. We have foster care and family. We help families. Right? How am I going to develop a tool? How am I going to figure it out? How am I going to drive an hour and a half? How am I going to pay for the mileage for Becky to drive an hour and a half? All these things, right? But who is it about? It's about Rebecca. And I will say, for a long time, that was our mentality. This is our program. This is what we're doing. We're sticking to it. And you will hear, and this is my opinion. I can't say anything against an organization that says, this is my program, you leave my program, I'm done with you. I understand. Understaffed, under-resources, we're all needing more money. But what if there is something? What if we find something, a simple tool like this, and I relieve you of sending your staff there, find a point person, again, let's use the families in the community that are already there, that know the mom, that know the community. But let's give them a tool and a training so that it's proper and accurate information. And so, just personally, from a personal level, I heard this, all this out stuff for 8 years, but we were so swamped with what we were doing, I didn't even think, I'm done, they left the orphanage, or I'm done, they left the foster care program, or whatever. But that's not what we're called to. We're called to excellence. And so researching and finding stuff like this is just one tool. I'm sure there's tons more. But getting out of our own heads and saying, okay, but what can I do? Even if I can't personally go and monitor this child for a year after they leave our program, or, I'm giving them this, they're coming and eating, what else can I do? We still have the tools and the resources, and partnership is the biggest thing to keep getting excellence, to keep getting to the next level. So whatever you think to use this tool for may be totally different than what we will use it for. But try to think outside of that. What's the next level step I can do for each kid in my program, or young woman, or whatever. And so this is a very simple thing, and we'll just walk through it, but that's my plug for excellence that we all strive for. There's just I really don't want to read all this to you because you can get the manual, but it just gives you, again, I just want you to see how usable it is. It lays out exactly how to talk, exactly what to do, what not to do, and so it really is easy to use personally, even if you're not a social worker, and to equip your point persons in the community or wherever your kids are from. So the thing that happens afterwards, make sure I'm not missing any of my notes. Okay, the thing that happens afterwards, like I said, you may go or get somebody to go and say you monitor a certain child or family, it can be a whole family, for 3 months. And you get enough bad and very bads that you realize we need to make a plan. And so that's when you can sit together as a team and with your point person and say, and this may be totally outside of your programs, but this is where your community mapping helps, because you can look for the program if it exists. And you can say, what do they need? They need vocational training. Y'all see that all the time, I assume. The moms need some education, microfinance opportunities. They need that after-school club, sports club, because the teenager's running around and mom can't get anything done because they keep getting her teenager out of drug issues or whatever. And so you can that's where you can make your plan, look on your map and see if it's already provided. If not, find a way in the community, local level authority if you can use them, the mayor, whoever. Let's start this program because there's enough kids that need it. So again, it complements your mapping and trying to fill in the gap services so your families aren't breaking apart in your communities. And this is just a tool to help you do that. And so this lays out, obviously, if they get very bad, what that means, what that looks like, bad, fair, and good. So it's just a very, very simple 4-point measuring tool. And that's us if you need it. So I have, if I can find what I did with them. So I have these just so you can kind of get an idea. If y'all want to take one and pass it around. That's just all the domains and so that just gives you a glance of all the domains, and then this is actually this is actually the report form that you would use or get from your point person that kept up with the child for you.
Do you need more, guys?
No.
You have 2 pages, right? 2. You have the first table? This one? No, I have it.
No, we have this.
Do you have more of this? Do you have more of this?
Yeah.
That's good. You need more?
Good. Can I get one more of these? Yeah.
Do you have this one as well? Because we don't have
This one.
Oh.
What's the latest conversation?
This is yours.
Thanks. Don't know how that was. So they primarily used this tool in the monitoring of HIV/AIDS in I assume Africa, but some country. And it was really good for them catching when kids were on the decline and getting them whatever they needed, before it was too late, specifically for malnutrition and such. And so if you dive into the manual, you'll see that it talks a lot about HIV/AIDS originally, but everything goes into any aspect of that a vulnerable child, mostly because of poverty, and then secondly, neglect, would experience. And so one of the areas, I just want to read you a couple of the questions, and I think that'll round up the idea of how this helps you. One of the areas on there is care, which is kind of hard to find out how well a child is being cared for. Like nutrition is a little easier. You can look around and see if there's even food in the house, things like that, but care is different. And so asking the child, who do you go to when you're hurt? Right? Who do you go to when you cry? Who helped you, if they're little, who helped you get dressed this morning? They give you actual questions that you can realize, is there a caretaker in their life, a primary one, or is it their, 10-year-old brother taking care of them all day? Things like that. So it's just questions that stir up that understanding that you may not have known how to ask that, right? If you're sitting there with the child.
Sorry, but the waters you're using is
The what?
Till what age of old?
I guess you could use it. I would think you could use it with any age. It didn't give an age range in the manual. And as you can see, some of the pictures are with older. You know, like here we've got social behavior. And so those are questions to find out, how is this kid doing socially? There's also spiritual questions. It's not always that they're not getting their physical needs met. You know, it can be this kid is struggling. What can we do to help them on the up and up? That's really it. It's really short. It's a very, very simple tool. Any questions that maybe I can answer, or any thoughts that you have going of how you could use this in the work you're doing now?
So the family, before you apply this, they need to agree to do this with them? Or?
I mean, you're not really telling them, I'm going to monitor and assess you right now, or even showing them CSI. It's basically you're building a relationship, but it gives you the proper way to engage them to find out if they're at risk. Does that make sense? If the family's at risk. I mean, obviously you introduce yourself. We have a program that we do this. We're helping in the community. So like, for example, with Rebecca, how we would use it, because like I said, we're still learning it so that we can use it and training ourselves in it, is Becky goes, or even our church, like a church group went, and they go and they see all these, you know, kids and poor kids and stuff, and it's hard to know who needs emergency help. And so this would be something Becky could do. She could go and assess and meet with individual families. She probably could talk to the health center and say, who do you feel like in the community might be an ask? Say we have an opening for 4 new families in our family preservation program. And so Becky could go and sit with each of those families. Of course, they'd have to be in agreement to talk. And she can, it tells you how to...
You're going to come back.
It's not secret. This is not
right.
like a spying something.
Right. They know you have programs to offer assistance. If it's a new family like that. But like for Rebecca, like it's our job to follow up. And so the mom knows for a whole year we're going to follow up and make sure she's taking care of Rebecca.
You tell them like there is a consequence if your performance is poor.
If it's something like Rebecca, DNAF will take her back if they don't.
So you tell them.
They know it from DNAF. Yeah, they know. We're doing the follow-up. We're going to report to DNAF how things are going. But then you have to have questions because they could lie to you all day long.
Yes.
So you have to have actual questions and insight and training because it talks to you about how to check out the living conditions.
So basically, it helps really to read the family situation.
Right.
The family needs. Yeah.
And
For help.
know if they are lying or
Well, just know
hiding.
what's really going on, right? And both ways. Not just that they're hiding something bad, but that the situation really isn't as bad as I think it is because I have different living conditions. Like I'm really evaluating, is the child taken care of? Right? Is she being fed? She doesn't have to look like my children because...
It's a difference.
And so it helps me do both ends, right?
So even if you don't work directly with child care, but you have projects that are helping different poor families, this will also be a way of seeing, okay, who have the biggest need, and maybe with building a house or giving them a toilet or water or whatever, that will actually maybe help them so they won't get in that danger zone of get their kid taken away.
Right, exactly. Prevention, the preventing of the family breaking up, right?
How important is the spiritual health and spiritual nurture in your assessment? Is it possible that the child can be taken away because family is not following Christian traditions?
No, I mean not government-wise, but we can know that we want to. So say, I don't know, we know this community that, and I feel it's related spiritually. We know this whole community, our friends do, and we tried to help them equip them a little bit, that basically abusive little children, like all the men are allowed to like abuse the children sexually. And so something's wrong with that community, right? And so obviously there's no spiritual formation there either, or that wouldn't be going on. So you have all kinds of things you could do there. But we would want to also implement, on top of understanding your body and what's allowed and not allowed, we would want to implement a Bible study or whatever. But the government would never take away their child because, you know, they train them up in that there is no God or anything, you know? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
But that's for that, you know, like if you have a program, you know, that's a good, you could use this to know, hey, this area needs, you know, a Bible study or a whatever. VBS. VBS, do y'all have VBS? Vacation Bible School. Yeah, that's fine. Gringo words.
I do think that we can use it in our program, even though that it's a bit different. But when we go out to the orphanages and want to get specific knowledge,
yeah,
because a lot of the times we're already more or less friends with the directors, and
yeah,
we have an opening there, but we all want to shine, right? We don't really want to show our bad sides, and maybe some of these questions can actually be helpful to figure out, so what is it exactly that's going on, so we as well can be better at doing our
yeah,
work.
exactly. Yeah, because I mean, I know a lot of kids that you go and you say, hey, are you eating? Are they feeding you? They're like, no, because they want food from you, but they really are eating, you know, like. Yeah. So I don't know. It can go both ways. That, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. But yeah, and I don't know. I hope it can help you with teens. I mean, I feel like a lot of it's still relevant because some teens, you know, really wouldn't want you to know if.
No, but at least
they have
having
bad
an idea of how to trick the question so it's not.
Yeah.
So it's indirect.
Yeah.
But you still will get the knowledge that you are
Right.
looking for.
Yeah, that's definitely a good. I love the question part, and you can get that out of the quick handbook, the CSI, the quick one.
Is that? Can you just print that?
It's all on their website. Mm-hmm. But I do strongly suggest at least one person on your team reading through the whole thing, and before you keep going. And like I said, we're still learning ourselves, but there's lots of good stuff. I guess that would be my final plug. Something we're trying to develop because we just now get to where we can. I just feel like that's everybody's story. We're just running. Yeah. But is evaluating our programs, right? Are they really feeling the need they need to feel? Is there, you know, how can we make them better? So that evaluation and assessing our programs are what we're giving. Are we really equipping the people, giving them dignity, empowering them to fly and not be dependent? And that website has tons of measuring and evaluating stuff, not just the CSI tool. So, sound good? Any questions? Well, I'm talked out. So, thank you guys for listening.